Welcome to the latest episode of our podcast series for financial advisors. This is our annual recap episode featuring the most valuable insights for advisors on goals, growth, and building something great. It's a culmination of the top advice and commentary from guests who shared their knowledge on the series during 2024. I'm Louis Diamond, and this is the Diamond Podcast for Financial Advisors.
This podcast is designed for advisors like you who are interested in learning more about the evolving wealth management industry through candid dialogue with breakaway advisors, those from the C-suite, and industry thought leaders. It's available on our website, diamond-consultants.com, as well as Apple Podcasts and other major podcast platforms. So be sure to subscribe and share it with your colleagues. At Diamond Consultants, our mission is to help advisors live their best business life. We want every elite advisor to find exactly the right place for their business and their clients to thrive, whether it's at a wirehouse, a regional, boutique, or independent firm. As the industry's leading recruiters and consultants, we've transitioned more than $250 billion in assets under management in the past decade. And each year, 25% of transitioning advisors who manage $1 billion or more are our clients. Curious about where, why, and how advisors like you are moving? Download the latest Advisor Transition Report to learn more, including intel on recruiting deals and our insight and analysis on the latest trends in the wealth management space. You'll find it at diamond-consultants.com/transition report. Or if you'd like to talk, feel free to give us a call at 908-879-1002.
When we started the series back in 2017, we had no idea how many meaningful conversations we would have with top financial advisors, C-suite executives, entrepreneurs, and thought leaders. It's gratifying when listeners share how a guest inspired them, or they learned something new, or how the conversations provided just the information they needed to help them create their best business life. And that's why we compiled this annual recap episode. It offers listeners a digest of some of the best advice from our 2024 season guests. Our goal in combing through 48 episodes was to extract the most compelling themes and relatable guidance from your peers. And what we found in our conversations was pretty amazing. Many of the most successful advisors, business owners, leaders, and entrepreneurs share a common thread. They each place incredible value on their why, their personal motivations that serve as the foundation for their success, and how the client is often at the heart of it. It's our annual compendium of advice on what it really takes to get from here to there and ultimately take your practice from good to great. I'm grateful to my partners, Mindy and Jason, who share the weekly responsibility of guiding these conversations. My job for this episode is to help connect the dots on their behalf and leave you with advice we hope you will find relevant, inspiring, and actionable. As always, be sure to refer to this episode's webpage for links to each full-length recording. There's a lot to share, so let's jump in. One of the most prominent themes we hear from some of the most successful people in the industry is around their why. That is, the vision they're working to realize and the motivation that drives them. Because, as Matt Brown, the founder of Case puts it, the passion of purpose helps you get through it all. Matt founded Case in 2009 with the vision of democratizing alternative investing and opening up access to firms of all sizes and levels. And that he did. But as he shares, there's a secret to succeeding as an entrepreneur.
You're never going to get the passion that's required to stay in the game for long periods of time, or as I say, the grit to really be willing to go through the dark periods as an entrepreneur, unless you have the passion for the purpose. So we knew we could change an industry. We knew we could be innovators. We knew that if we did and were successful, it would be very rewarding. But it really does start with the mission and the purpose.
Jeff Brown, president of Stratos Wealth, and no relation to Matt Brown, wore many hats in his career as he transitioned his book of business from the wirehouses to independence. Yet a nagging what-if feeling inspired him to conduct strategic due diligence, leading him first to sell a minority stake in his business and later a majority stake. And it all revolved around the important question of what is his why.
Something for your audience is to as clear as somebody can get about what they want before they start looking, I think that's the best thing. What is the why? What do you want to have 5 and 10 years down the road? Because there is even a lot more options today than when I started that original hunt, call it in 2019.
For the founder and managing director of Next Level Private Wealth, Barry Mitchell, his why was focused around putting the best interests of his clients first. And when it became clear he could not serve as a true fiduciary, he decided it was time to make a change. Here's how he described it to Mindy.
What were some of the pushes or limitations you might have been experiencing?
One thing I always had consternation over, borderline embarrassment over, when somebody would ask me, are you a fiduciary? And like every other listener on this podcast that is at a wirehouse, I would contend just about, if not every single one of them, tries to put their client's best interest first. But the reality is the answer to that question is, are you a fiduciary? The answer was no. And then, but I always put your best interest first. It was always a tap dance afterwards. The answer is no, you are not a fiduciary. And the reason is simple. The people that run those firms are a fiduciary, but not to the advisors, not to the clients, but to the shareholders. They're public banks. So there's a conflict inherent, which is why the industry spends so much money to separate the brokerage standard or the suitability standard from the fiduciary standard.
Mike Quinn, a former market manager at Wells Fargo Advisors, left the wirehouse world to launch Daymark Wealth Partners, growing the business from $1 billion to $4 billion in record time. He elaborated on Barry's sentiment around focusing on the clients.
My view was that I worked for the financial advisors and their clients. And directionally, as I mentioned, some of the larger wires, now the banks, started moving away from that model, in my opinion. And while it was a very good run, I believe that clients still turn on our lights and that we should serve them and only them. And so when we started to look out across the landscape as to where to land and how to stay true to our beliefs and what we thought was most important, which was the clients, that led away from where I had been my whole career and toward really building something and creating something on our own. When I sat in the seat, my belief was that I worked for financial advisors and clients. And so directionally, as I mentioned, the banks and wires were moving away from that, in my opinion. And that gave me pause to really want to move back towards working directly for advisors and clients.
In one of our most popular episodes of the year, I had the pleasure of hosting a video roundtable episode with 3 ex-Merrill advisors who run separate businesses but built their own community to share ideas and support one another. In that episode, Matt Liebman, CEO of $1.5 billion Amplius Wealth Advisors, offered a similar perspective on how his focus on clients and changing agendas at the big firms led them to launch an independent firm. His experience also exposed the reality that to get from here to there often means making a change.
Every good advisor, whether they're at a wirehouse, they're independent, somewhere in between, thinks of their client as their boss, their collective clients. That's who we're in this business to work for. We work for the clients. But more and more at a big firm, I felt like I was twisting myself in a pretzel to keep that the case, that effectively the local management had an agenda, the regional management had an agenda, the bank had an agenda, the board of directors and the shareholders. And that's a lot of agendas before, I'm not even criticizing them, I'm more just critiquing the model. We just wanted to simplify that. Like, okay, what do my clients want? And let's just work for our clients exclusively. So I don't know, Louis, that I can pinpoint there was this one day, although my dad, Aaron, and I joked, there was one lunch we had where at some point during the lunch, and I was always the most conservative of the three of us, I banged my hand on the table and I said, that's it, we're going. And I don't even remember what it was that happened that day. But it was just a series of things. And then just looking at the overall business models and the comparisons, like we just couldn't unsee what we saw. It was time to go.
Michael Kitsis, someone who needs little introduction in our industry, conducted a survey on advisor happiness, which revealed some interesting correlations between autonomy and well-being. It's a great episode, so be sure to give it a listen. What's interesting is that it acknowledges that for some, the realization that the firm they joined decades ago may no longer align with an advisor's why. That is, even an advisor's motivations or goals may change over time.
There are so many different choices in the industry because I think they all represent different trade-offs around that autonomy scale or the different autonomy factors. And I think what we really have is an industry that by and large is actually pretty decent at self-sorting into the channel and the firm arrangements that actually align to that. But we're not perfect. Sometimes we land in the wrong channel. Sometimes we land in the right place, but the firm changes and this place isn't what it was 10, 20 years ago when I joined. Sometimes that crops up. Sometimes we just grow and change and priorities change.
That growing and changing concept is one that Jason Diamond discussed with Jason Barber and Taylor Pankratz. They were members of a group at Edward Jones with over 4 decades and 3 generations under its belt. Their decision to leave Edward Jones to launch independent firm Holistic Planning was a difficult one, but one they ultimately felt set them up for success in generations to come.
After 41 years, it was definitely not a decision we took lightly. We thought about it for at least a year and a half, maybe 2 years, and we loved Edward Jones. But the reality is that we outgrew it. And like probably a lot of advisors get to the point in the business where they want to be able to deliver more services to their clients, hire additional staff, leverage more sophisticated investments for their clients, just to be able to scale and grow their business. And what we encountered was we had every aspiration to do that. And the reality is you reach a certain point at our previous firm where you just cannot feasibly grow any bigger. They just don't allow you to do it. And a lot of it is probably because their business model is built more for a bunch of smaller advisors instead of wanting a lot of big advisors. And so they don't make it very easy to grow. And so we just outgrew Jones. That's really the best way to describe it. So we just got tired of having a governor on the growth. And I would say now that we can actually hire the staff we want, add the services that we want, deliver the investment options that people want, we're growing more. We've grown more this year than we've ever grown in the past 41 years because that's what was holding you back. And I think a lot of people don't understand that the fintech industry is at a point where the broker-dealers are actually holding advisors back from growing more than they are supporting them. It used to be that they were supporting the advisor and the advisor needed these big name brand broker dealers to do business. The technology has gotten to the point where you don't need that anymore. And in fact, it's probably what's holding the advisor back from growing more than they could if they broke away.
The question of stay versus go comes with several avenues to consider. For those who are looking to change firms, the prospect of a lucrative recruiting deal from another big brokerage firm is attractive. But when the motivation is more about long-term gain versus short-term windfall, independence may become the path of choice. Ex-Merrill advisor Brett Bernstein talked with Mindy about the notion of forgoing a 7-figure recruiting check for something that could be potentially much bigger down the road. And it's clear his decision paid off because his independent firm, XML Financial Group, has grown to become a very valuable $4 billion enterprise.
Back when you were leaving Merrill, especially because you said LPL wasn't offering any transition money at the time, was it hard to forgo the notion of a big recruiting deal at the time?
Yeah, for us, it was 7-figure deals. We were all fairly young. I had my first child, right? You're sitting there going, ooh, it's a lot of money. But we were looking for something bigger. And remember, the recruiting deals a lot of times come in a forgivable note. So if you bring enough business and the markets do well, then it's great. But if your business goes down and you have to tap into that recruiting dollars, then it really wasn't necessarily worth it. So when we were looking at that mindset, because we had seen people leave and the .com hit and they were having to eat into their money to survive, we looked at it and said, that's not going to make or break us, right? Putting $1 million or $2 million or whatever the number was at that time, while it was a lot of money, and it still is today, we were shooting for something bigger. And so I'm not going to be penny wise, pound foolish, or in that case, a couple million wise, pound foolish when we had a bigger goal that we were striving for. But yes, I'd be lying if I said it wasn't in the back of our minds.
Although the truth of the matter is, with 110 million under management, the size of the deal you would have gotten would have paled in comparison to the value of the enterprise, to use your words, you've built with today $3.5 billion and growing under management.
Oh, yeah. Even investing that money and doing really well, not even in the same ballpark. There's so many pieces to the puzzle. At the end of the day, life is a chess match, and we have to decide how we want to play that match. And there's quality of life. It's not just money. There's many different things. You're right. Moving a business, it can be monumental. And that's why I go back to when you asked me the question a few minutes ago. I asked them, what is it you're trying to solve for? And sometimes the answer is quality of life or product and service, or I just want to make the most amount of money. Okay, let's understand that and then let's solve for it.
Likewise, Alan Boomer could have taken a big check to transition from Goldman. Instead, he bet it all on his own unique superpowers to build what he refers to as a 100-year business that he calls Momentum Advisors.
Most folks took the big check, the 7-8-figure check to go somewhere else. For me, again, the contrarian in me said, well, if I know that Wall Street is all about valuation, they typically want to buy something for a discount. And I said to myself, if these firms are willing to offer me 7 figures, like that's a lot of money. I must have something that's pretty valuable. And it made me want to hold on to it and capitalize on it myself. There's a quality of life that comes with owning your own business that I don't know if folks fully appreciate. There's the money that you can make is really good owning your own business. There's not having to answer to a boss. You got a lot of bosses, your clients, but not a corporate boss. It's you being able to do business the way you want to do business, where you want to do business, with whom you want to do business. That stuff is really valuable. And I'm young. As I mentioned, I'm in my mid-40s. I'm not trying to sell and then work for someone for 20 years. Like I'd rather make that decision in 20 years. But we're setting the groundwork right now.
Let's shift gears a bit to consider how an advisor's why influences their value proposition. No doubt, the landscape has become incredibly crowded with competition in the quest to attract and retain clients, as well as to fuel inorganic growth. My conversation with Freestone Capital's Gary Furukawa and Eric Morgan was one of the most interesting of the year. They've cornered the market on innovation when it comes to investments, offering distinctive options for their clients, including real estate, golf courses, and even bourbon. And it's a value proposition that drove their growth to over $9 billion in assets. Eric offered some thoughts on this concept.
One of the things we're very proud about as an organization is that we've really specialized. We have people that are focused exclusively on clients, people that are focused exclusively on investments, on operations, on planning. So we've really built out a robust full team that's designed to take care of clients. When I think about what Freestone does today and we bring to clients, the way I like to look at it is that we're really a firm of no excuses. You can come to Freestone and receive fantastic planning work, fantastic estate work, tax work, philanthropic work, concierge, consigliere, and investments, all of which you can get here and really have world-class. Gets overused a lot, but I really do believe for the clients between $5 million and $100 million, we really are a differentiated opportunity for them.
It was May of 2020 when Justin Berman first shared his breakaway story on our show. Justin talked with Mindy about his perspective on leaving the prestigious brand of Goldman Sachs to launch independent firm Berman Capital Advisors and growing it to over $5 billion in AUM over the course of 10 years. Then, in September of 2021, it was announced that Justin's firm would merge with Crescent Asset Management. As Justin put it, his transitions were about considering the future, his clients' needs, and his firm's ability to serve those needs and grow the business going forward. And it's proving to be a good decision. In just 3 years with Crescent, his revenue increased from $17 million to $27 million.
I think the utopia of our space is really to be a family's first call, no matter what the issue is, whether it's a tax issue, an estate issue, an investment issue. Our job as an advisor and as a fiduciary is to be that first call. And in certain business models, you're just not able to do that for whatever reason. But the reason why we wanted to build Berman Capital was to use my background as a CPA, but combine that with estate planning and other family office services to really treat each family as its own single family office. And we were not able to do that under certain business models.
We ask every guest on our show to share some advice with advisors who may or may not be thinking about change right at this moment. Whether it be challenges to look out for, something they wish they did differently, or just things to think about, each are candid golden nuggets derived from a peer's experience. I think Matt Brown of Case really hit it out of the park with his response.
Number one, do not listen to your critics. When you're starting something new, it is so much easier for someone to say it won't work than it will work. When I started Case, I think it was 10 to 1. And I know who the ones are that said it was a great idea. And if it worked, it could change the game. And the other 9 said, it'll never work. And by the way, mathematically, they may be right. But you just have to have the conviction. Don't listen to the critics. There's a good chance if you're successful, they'll all remind you that they were supportive. And just go for it and do whatever you can do to stay focused, have a close relationship with capital, have great partners, and keep the conviction on the mission.
As they say, hindsight is 20/20. I asked Brent and Brad Chappell, brothers who left a 4-decade family legacy at Merrill behind to launch Chappell Wealth Management, what they might have done differently in their transition. And here's what Brent said. Now that you're over a year out, any regrets or things you wish you did differently, both pre and post launch?
The thing that comes to mind was just worry. We wish we'd worried less, or I wish that I'd worried less, but candidly, there's no counterfactual, right? We only know the way that things turned out, and you could easily argue that fear of failure and that worry created the necessary prep work for a successful transition. So that may not even be a fair answer. One thing that we definitely didn't have a full appreciation for is financial plumbing, how data flows from a custodian to a trading firm and then clearing the trades and how that gets reported. I think there were elements of that we took for granted. Spending 20 years at Merrill, I knew how things operated at Merrill, and that's it. They don't have a monopoly on the way to run things. They do some things really well, but we didn't have a full appreciation for that. And there's some elements of that are not as well connected or as well delivered for clients, right? It's a third party that does reporting on some things, and they may account for accrued interest differently than the custodian. So the numbers are off by pennies or a couple of dollars, and that's not always reassuring to clients. Like, well, if that dollar's missing, is there another dollar that's missing? And both are valid methodologies, but they're not the same methodology. So I think that if we had taken more time to understand some of those nuances, that we still would have made the same decision, but we could have communicated what to experience to clients in a little bit better way.
In that Merrill Breakaway Video Roundtable I mentioned earlier, Michael Henley, the founder and CEO of the $1.6 billion Brandywine Oak Private Wealth, and Jerry Davidsey, CEO of $500 million Brazilian Private Wealth, and Matt Liebman of $1.5 billion Amplius Wealth Advisors, who we heard from earlier, each weigh in on what they would tell themselves if they could go back in time prior to their transition.
To have complete confidence that this is going to work out, because I wasn't sure a year before and even the day before. It's difficult to know what your clients are going to say until you do it. But in hindsight, they saw the same thing that I saw. They realized that this would be a much better experience on this side. And all of them were really excited when they got that phone call, got the email, got the video that we had started our own firm. So I feel like Matt and Michael had the same experience, and most other advisors would too. I had a lot of sleepless nights thinking about how it might go. So I wish I had known ahead of time how well it would have gone. It would have made the days and weeks leading up to it a lot easier.
I would say for us anyway, for me, a year before launching, I would say trying to learn every single detail. I think I'm analytical from that standpoint. I want to know every single detail, how it's all going to fit together. To some extent, you want to be educated, but you don't want to obsess over all the minutia. Focus on your client relationships. Clients hire you for advice. And the one thing that does not change in your transition is the advice you give them. So that's why they hire you in the first place. I would say the day before, I would say get ready for some surprises, whether it's a firm name change, like some happens to some firms, or it's a Fidelity or the custodial changing their pricing or whatever it is. Just get ready. You cannot have all the answers day one.
I think if you put yourself in the shoes of the client and you think about what you would want to know as a client that day, make sure as an advisor and leader of advisory firm that you'd lock up all those things in advance. Those are the essentials. And the rest, we always said we had the transition and then we had the transition from the transition.
I would just echo what Matt said there, is basically try and focus on strike the balance of what matters to your clients. I had so much head trash around, secure messaging. This stuff is nonsense, but stuff that really gets in your head. I was like, oh my gosh, the long-term care policies are not going to be on the Fidelity statement. It was like, the clients are never going to go for this. That's complete head trash. It's all in your head. Clients don't care. They're there for you. They don't care about all this. A lot of that stuff, I swear, I look back and I'm like, what was I thinking? Who cares? But it's just in the moment, you're so ingrained. This is what clients are used to and what they care about.
Jeff Brown, the president of Stratos Private Wealth, takes an entrepreneur's perspective and highlights the importance of finding the right partners.
For the true entrepreneur, Or most importantly, for the person that wants to build true enterprise value. And I think that last piece is the big difference, what you get on the independent side. I think that's what you do. So you really have to have that mindset of, yes, I want to be the business owner instead of just the senior advisor in the business. I just see so many folks that I've talked to over the years that want to make a move, and they've talked about it for so long. And the reason they're not doing it is because of all of the stuff that needs to be done. And you can whittle away a lot of that stuff by choosing a good support partner and then make the move sooner. So I would argue that, hey, pick a partner, make the move, learn more about everything. And then if you pick the wrong partner or you want to go it on your own, most of these firms, you can make a change.
I love Justin Berman of Crescent's comments and being humble. And if you know Justin, no doubt that is embedded in his character.
Not every piece of business is good business. And you'll figure out for yourself what good business and what not good business is. Because the good business are the clients that you work with that appreciate you, that love you, and that are picking up the phone and telling all of their friends about you. So that's one. I think most importantly, though, in our business, you have to be humble. And you have to realize that you aren't the only one out there who's good at your job. And the more you can understand that early on in your career and realize that your job is really to sell. And as I tell people, no matter what you want to do in life, whether you want to be a doctor, an accountant, a teacher, you have to sell at some point. So realizing that early on is critical.
Mike Quinn of Daymark Wealth Partners stresses that to excel means being a consummate student of the industry.
I think to be good at your craft, you need to be a steward of the industry that you're in. And so I think that it's positive to be curious. Your life, your career, it's a journey, and we think about it that way. Exploring and learning doesn't mean that there's necessarily anything to do or you have to do anything. It may just validate that you're in the right place and may make you better and understand the competition better. So my encouragement would be, if you're curious, get out there and learn. There are a lot of professionals out there to help you do that. You guys are certainly at the top of that list. Most of the elite teams we work with never stop learning and trying to get better and get that next gear. And I think that being curious about the industry and change is part of that process.
In building a $1 billion business at Wells Fargo, Angie Ostendarp and Jordan Raniszewski realized they had outgrown the model and saw independence as their path to breaking free of the limitations they were experiencing. They had some valuable experience to share about launching Carnegie Private Wealth. Angie first, then Jordan. Any parting thoughts or advice for those thinking about change or in the place where you guys were a year and a half or 2 years ago, which is getting stressed out with the prospect of change, but really thinking about what's the best path forward?
Yeah, I think go educate yourself. We had to do that. We had to understand what independence was, supported independence was, going RIA, staying with the wire. We had to understand what all of those meant and understand your book, go through it with a fine-tooth comb, really understand who you have in there. Everybody told us you'll be disappointed at some that don't come, but you'll be surprised at others that don't even bat an eye. So, and then prepare with the firm you're going to. Like LPL had us prepared. We did gap analysis on our book and that sort of thing. Prepare what you're allowed to prepare, follow the rules, and know that the first 3 months, if you're married, tell your spouses you'll see them in 3 months. Buckle down, don't take offense at anything, and put your head down and believe in it. And I promise you, a year later, you'll be ecstatic that you left and wonder why you didn't leave earlier.
Well said. Jordan, your turn.
I would say if you're feeling like you're wondering whether where you are is the right fit, you're doing yourself a disservice by not exploring what's out there. And I would convict myself of that for maybe a long time, is I had my head down. I was working, I was serving my clients. It was fine. But it would have been probably to my best interest if we had explored and educated ourselves a little bit more on what was out there, because it's a big industry. There's lots of ways to do business. There's lots of really cool new models and ways of doing things. And I think that what I would say is talk to people, like really try to educate yourself. Feel free to reach out to me or to anybody that you know that's gone that route and can help you understand the industry a little bit better. Because I think a lot of advisors who are at wirehouses, they don't know what's out there. They really don't understand the business models that are out there. And I think it's easy to just say, oh, it's all the same, but it's not all the same. And there's lots of different ways to do it. And you really need to find what's the best fit for you. And I think the only way you can do that is by understanding better the landscape and trying to figure out what does ideal look like for you.
I think Alan Boomer of Momentum really takes it home with his parting advice. Let his words guide you through 2025.
The final thing I'll say is just a quote that really changed my life. I got a card from one of my aunts when I graduated business school, and the card had a quote from Maya Angelou. And the quote simply said, "Don't make money your goal. Instead, pursue the things you love to do and do them so well that people can't take their eyes off you." And that's my parting word for you, the listener.
Curious about where, why, and how advisors like you are moving? Download the latest Advisor Transition Report to learn more, including intel on recruiting deals and our insight and analysis on the latest trends in the wealth management space. You'll find it at diamond-consultants.com/transition report. Or if you'd like to talk, feel free to give us a call at 908-879-1002.